What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Do It With Dan, and right next to me I have the Indian Scout 101 that Indian Motorcycles let me borrow for about a month and test, and they wanted me to do a review and tell me what I think, and they just wanted me to overall enjoy the motorcycle. And unfortunately, the time has come to where we have to give it back. I say unfortunately because I really have grown fond of this motorcycle, but I'm gonna close out my loan opportunity period with an honest to God, very simple, very clear review of the motorcycle. I have several points that I want to make. I want to answer a couple of questions that you guys had about the bike. I want to give you a clear consensus on where I stand on the motorcycle, what my opinions are of the bike, the value of the motorcycle, all that other stuff. Yeah, let's take it from the top. All right, first things first about the motorcycle. I think most people will probably agree with me on this. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's a beautiful motorcycle, from the styling, the paint scheme, the way everything fits together, the stylization of everything, even the OEM blinkers and license plate holder. I mean, all of it is just done so well from a stylistic standpoint. They've really outdone themselves with the Scout over the years. I've always thought it was a really pretty bike, but the way they've just kind of modified the 101 to fit a slightly different culture, I would say, it's just top notch. I think there's not very many people who would disagree with me to say that this bike isn't beautiful. I mean, just drop dead gorgeous, in my opinion. Now, one of the things that people pointed out to me relatively quickly after receiving the bike is that the mirrors are technically on upside down. If you look at photos of the bike on the website and you see most people riding them, the bar end mirrors that Indian offers, they're actually upside down. They flip them to where they're below the handlebars. This is how I received the motorcycle. Whoever did it for a reason, whether it be transportation or that's their preference, whatever. But I did try flipping them around, and I gotta say, I think I prefer the mirrors on top like this. I feel like it's easier to look at. It's still aesthetically pleasing, so you don't lose that like pretty factor of having the bar ends. And I think it's just easier to see that way. You're not kind of tucking down and looking. I think the over the bar ends is better than under the bar. Just my 2 cents. And speaking of the mirrors and the handlebars, one of the things that I noticed that Indian did that I thought was kind of lazy is that even though that this bike comes with factory bar end mirrors, they just kind of cap off the OEM threads for where you would screw in normal bar over mirrors. I guess they still wanted to keep that option for people who didn't like the bar ends and still wanted to go with a traditional bar over mirror, which I guess I get. For me, it's just kind of hard looking at the handlebars and seeing just like a little plastic cap over where they would screw in the OEM mirrors. I figured if they're gonna spend the money and make this bike custom, they would do that and make their own custom controls and kind of, or maybe even file those down and paint over them. I don't know. It's probably a lot of work, and it's probably a cost-saving technique rather than an opportunity technique. I was just kind of like, meh, you know, they could have not done that. I think it would have given it a little bit more of a cleaner look if they didn't. But that is me nitpicking. But again, that's what I want to do in this video. I want to nitpick this bike as much as possible so you guys know exactly what to expect. Another gripe that I had was the stock exhaust. I mean, you guys can look at it and tell how big it is. It's got almost no sound to it. There's been several times where you're just cruising and riding where it reminded me of the Zero, where there's no engine noise, kind of like a hiss almost. And I think that is a huge detriment to selling this motorcycle. I think that it needs to have a good sound to it. And obviously that can be remedied with an exhaust, right? But that's more money you have to spend on top of what the bike already costs just to get a sound. I mean, it has almost no sound from stock. And I think not only is that like a little disheartening, you know, you're kind of like, oh man, it's such a beautiful bike. It doesn't have a beautiful sound. On top of that, I think it's kind of a little unsafe. There's a lot of people who think loud pipes save lives. And I, within reason, agree with it kinda, you know. That is something that I think that I would change immediately. It'd be the first thing that I did, is lop off this bazooka of an exhaust. And not only will doing that make it sound better, but it will reduce a ton of weight. I mean, you have so much weight in this exhaust back here. One of the big concerns that I read in the comments was price. This bike comes in at around $17,000, I believe $16,999. That's a hefty price. After tag, tax, and title, you're probably looking at closer to like $18,000, $19,000. You know what your sales tax is. Georgia here, it's 7%. Probably looking at like 18.5, close to 19. And that's expensive. I have a very hard time justifying motorcycles costing anything north of $12,000 to $15,000 because that's like where bikes are headed. You know, your traditional motorcycle is headed very close to that $20,000 mark. And if you remember just back in 2016, you could buy an H2 for less than $20,000. It's really hard to justify the power and technology that goes into something like that versus like something like this, right? However, right? However, I think that might be a fair price for the idea of an eternal bike, right? Like a motorcycle that you're not looking to bump up or sell in anytime soon. You know, you can invest your money into a motorcycle that's going to do a lot of the things that you need it to do. And I think that's closer to being fair. I still think $17,000 for this motorcycle is a bit much. If this bike was in the closer to like the $12,000 to $14,000 range, it would be a no-brainer. It would be absolutely worth it. But I think pushing that $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 after sales tax and whatnot, I think that is too much. So I think in the future, being able to pick up one of these things lightly used for probably 12 to 14, it is going to be a steal for that. Or even in the next coming like 5 years, getting one for like 8 to 10,000, I think that's going to be a very good deal. Now, as far as comfortability, I would say that it is comfortable enough. It's not sitting on a couch. It's certainly not a full-blown chieftain. It is a Scout. It is a sport cruiser. I mean, you do have some nice reservoir shocks. It's got a good chunk of amenities like ABS and cruise control, and it's got really easy navigation, a bunch of stuff on the speedometer, which we'll cover here in a second. I mean, it does have your comfortable amenities, and I would say that the bike is probably built for people between like 5'10" and 6'2". I think any taller, you're gonna feel like you dwarf this motorcycle, and then any shorter, you know, I'm about 5'9". It's just a little bit of a reach, right? Now, there are stuff that you can change about this motorcycle, like your bar risers or your handlebars, that does kind of affect that. And all that stuff is available on their website. And they were going to send me some. Our time frame did not work out. But I would say if you're between the heights of like 5'10", 6'2", you're gonna have a great time on this bike. It's gonna be plenty comfortable. And I would say anywhere between 3 to 4 hour ride is about where this bike is gonna peak. I probably wouldn't ride any longer than that in kind of one stretch, just because of the seat and the angle that it is for me. But that being said, it is comfortable enough, if that makes sense. You can probably ride anywhere within your own state and not get uncomfortable. On top of riding comforts, at about 8 to 10,000 RPM, or between 8 to 10,000 RPM, I should say, it does vibrate a little bit, just enough to notice. It's not uncomfortable. It's not the numbing kind of vibrations, kind of like the CB1000 that I have, where when you start to get to that 10 to 12K range, pegs vibrate, your handlebars vibrate, and it can be a little uncomfortable, almost numbing. And while this thing does still vibrate a little bit, which is to be expected from a V-twin that's revving to 10,000 RPM, they're just very mild vibrations. It's noticeable. That's about where that ends, is that it's noticeable. Now, one of the things that a lot of people picked up on in the comments was the windscreen, right? I guess in the video, the windscreen doesn't look very stable at points. When I'm doing my 80, 90, 100 mile pull, people are like, wow, what a flimsy windscreen. And I have to say that is fake news. That is false information. The windscreen is not flimsy at all. It's going to be really hard to convey this to you guys on video, but that thing is very stable. It might not look like it because of the way cameras work and stuff like that, but I promise you, like, you can tug on this thing, it feels very strong. It's mounted very heavily. It's made out of good plastic. I mean, that is simply caused by your perception. I would not lie to you on this. I promise you, this thing is very stout. I would trust this hitting, I wouldn't say bird, but maybe like certainly some smaller rock chip, stuff like that. It's gonna deflect them just fine. It's not gonna fly off on you in the highway when you're doing 100 and 120 mile an hour. So I'm gonna chalk that one up to fake news, guys. Fake news, the windscreen is very, very stout. Now, another thing that I noticed that someone else pointed out to me, right? I wasn't gonna cover this until somebody else mentioned this, is the fact that there are QR codes fucking everywhere. There is a QR code on every piece of this motorcycle, on the suspension, on the exhaust, on the brakes, on the seat, on the reservoir, on the handlebars, on cables. There's QR codes on every piece of this motorcycle. And I guess that's just how Indian does it. Right? I see a lot of manufacturers do the QR codes on parts. I know GM does it. I'm sure Ford does it. It makes it really easy for mechanics to check inventory and scan parts. Oh, this part's broken? Just take a photo with your phone and it'll pull it up and order it for you. I get that. I think that's a great feature, but it's a little weird seeing a motorcycle like this covered in QR codes. I guess it doesn't take away anything from the motorcycle, but like you can't look at this bike without seeing a handful of QR codes. And I feel like that takes away from the aesthetic. It's like, oh, don't forget, you got to replace this part. You just take a photo of it. So it's great for convenience, but I think it does kind of kill like the aesthetic of it just a little bit. You know, obviously you don't see them from far away, but when you're up on close on the motorcycle, it's like QR code, QR code, QR code, QR code, QR code. They're fucking everywhere. Sidebar here. Do you have any bad habits? Who are we kidding? I know you do. I've seen your Instagram posts. Seek help. But I would never judge you or anything like that. That's not what I'm here to do. But Fume, which is today's sponsor, could absolutely help you with that. Fume is an excellent way to help you break your bad habit. And no, it's not what you think it is. It's not a vape, there's no juices or dangerous addictive chemicals, there's no burning, and it's not some sort of vape or smoking device. Nothing like that. Just delicious and naturally flavored air. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Check out some of these absolutely delicious flavors, like sparkling grapefruit, orange vanilla, my favorite, spearmint ice, black licorice, cinnamon hearts, white cranberry, one of my favorites, maple pepper. I mean, they're all really good. No smoke, no vapor, no addictive chemicals. And it is an extremely satisfying fidget device. Magnetically snaps together, that is very satisfying. Excellent weight in the hand, it's built very well. And the notchiness to this little guy, oh man, that just really scratches an itch. I don't know how else to describe it. And Fume has a ton of success stories. They've served over 300,000 customers, and that next success story could be you. And for a limited time, if you use my coupon code, DOITWITHDAN at checkout, you get a free topper with the purchase of a journey pack. It's truly the perfect add-on for your Fume device. Just slip that bad boy on for a softer and warmer feel. Oh yeah, we like that here. It's also chewable and reusable, so it's perfect for fidgeters. So head on over to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use coupon code DOITWITHDAN at checkout, or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, and you'll get that free topper with the purchase of your journey pack. Give it a shot, man. You're gonna love the way you taste. I guarantee it. So thank you again, Fume, for sponsoring today's video. It's been excellent to work with you guys. Thank you so much. Excellent company. They got a lot of cool stuff. And if you're looking for something to help you kick that bad habit, I highly suggest giving it a shot. Now let's go back to the review. Now, as far as performance goes, incredibly powerful motorcycle. It's got a great power band. It's very consistent. It pulls through the whole thing. It's got a very impressive lean angle for how big this bike is, right? This bike comes in around like 550 pounds. It is a full-blown sports cruiser, right? I would say that it's beefier than like my Magna, or like a Honda Shadow or a Rebel, but certainly less than like a Valkyrie or a V-Rod. You know, it's certainly a lot smaller than those motorcycles too. And it handles pretty well in most curvy situations, if you know what I'm saying. And I don't mean fat chicks, all right? There's no room for fat chicks on this bike. It is very quick. I would say it's almost fast. I would say that motorcycles get fast around the 140 to 150 mile per hour range. And this thing peters out about 120. Not that you need that on a bike like this, but you know, but definitely a quick motorcycle, damn near almost fast. Now, obviously, since this is a sports cruiser, there is zero room for storage, not even like an under bucket like you would on a sport bike. What you see is what you get. Again, they were talking about sending out some like saddlebags for me to test, which I do think having bags on here would be a great option, especially if you plan on using this thing more than just running up to the store and getting some beer or going to have lunch with your bros. I think bags, some storage on this would be nice. And that's what I would have done. If this bike was mine, I probably would put some sort of storage bags on it, so I wouldn't have to carry a bag with me everywhere I go. You can wear a backpack on a sports bike, but I don't think you look cool wearing a backpack on a cruiser. It just doesn't work, you know? Now, I think while having this motorcycle, my favorite reaction was from a handful of Harley riders, right? I think we all know that Harley is struggling. They're going woke, they're going broke kind of deal. I'm not gonna bring Harley politics into this, but I will say that there was a lot of Harley rider copium in my comments with this. Not from everybody. A lot of Harley riders are very respectful of the Indian brand. Arguably one of the best motorcycles that Indian has ever produced, right? So I find it kind of strange that Harley riders would rag on this motorcycle, but I get it. You know, you're spending $24,000 for a bike that makes half the horsepower. Totally understand. Actually, Dan, actually, my Harley makes more power and more torque. Nobody fucking asked, bro. But one of the things that I really like about this motorcycle is just how well everything feels like it's built. There's a lot of CNC'd aluminum, a lot of brushed aluminum or gloss black on here. You know, everything feels weighty but not heavy, right? If you've ever ridden like a Sportster, they have that like almost iron feel. Like everything feels so heavy and chrome. You don't have that here. Everything feels really well made. And that's one of the things that I really do like about the motorcycle. There's not really a piece on this bike that feels cheap. They didn't cheap out on the shifter linkage. Everything is Indian branded, so you know they spent the extra time. Whether or not it's rebranded stuff, I don't know. I'm assuming these are like Olin shocks that have just been rebranded Indian, but I don't know. And they look like they're built a little bit different. So they could be completely in-house, I don't know. But that leads me to my next point, which is that this is not a very universal motorcycle. There's not a lot of aftermarket parts for these bikes because everything is kind of proprietary, you know, with good quality, good homemade in-house custom built stuff. You kind of lose that universal fitment market that a lot of like the sport bikes have, or like, let's say your Japanese cruisers and stuff like that. They have a lot of universal parts. The handlebar controls are proprietary, which means your brake and clutch lever are proprietary, which means that you can't just go pick up a cool aftermarket one. You gotta wait for Indian to make one, or for a very expensive company to make one. So you lose out on the universal market, meaning that the aftermarket parts for this bike are expensive and a little bit few and far between. So if you're looking into getting a motorcycle to build up, just know that you're probably gonna run into more of like a options battle than you would a price battle, even though that it's still gonna probably be kind of expensive. But entirely, I think my biggest gripe, my one entire big gripe about this entire motorcycle is the power button. I think it looks awful. It kind of reminds me of like turning on the original Xbox, you know, the Xbox One. Press that big button and it's just a huge power button. It takes up like the whole area. I don't think it looks good aesthetically on this motorcycle. It almost gives it like a cheap electric motorcycle look. I think that was a bad choice. That's just me personally. This bike is key fob instead of a turnkey, which I also don't like. So instead of having an ignition where you turn the key, you get the big button. They probably could have done something different than having just a big ass power button on it. Then, you know, looking at the style, I don't know what they would have done to hide a switch or something. I'll tell you what though, it did not take me very long to figure out how to turn it on. There's a big ass power button right there. But that big gripe kind of leads me into my last little bit of gripes here, which is unnecessary features of a motorcycle, right? One of the reasons that this bike costs so much is because it is littered with features. Some good, you know, some not so good. I used to be a hardcore, like, I don't want any bullshit on my motorcycle. I want it to run and ride and that's it. But over the years, I've really come accustomed to things like ABS. I think ABS is a great option. It works very well on this platform. You've got a double caliper up front that's very strong. The ABS works great, and then you also have a very strong rear caliper for your rear brake. It's impossible to lock up with the ABS on, obviously, and it actually has saved my butt twice now. So that is a feature that I think is very important, and I'm happy to have on this motorcycle. However, the speedometer and everything that surrounds it, I feel is borderline unnecessary. And I'm gonna talk now in depth about the speedometer because it is a huge selling point. It is a pivotal point on this motorcycle, in my opinion. First things first, the speedometer is very advanced for a cluster of a motorcycle of this capacity, right? I would expect to see something like this on like a fully built bagger, but not on like a sport cruiser. And truth is, I really wanted to hate it, and I also really wanted to love it. And I'm kind of right in the middle on both of that. Its user interface is, for what it is on a motorcycle, is powerful. However, it's not fast. It's not slow either. It's relatively responsive. It's touchscreen, and you also have menu navigations on the actual speedometer itself, as well as you can navigate the menu with your hand controls. That's very convenient, but it does feel very unnecessary and it feels kind of limited. I do think it's enjoyable to have something like the speedometer with all your options and it's all easily controlled from the handlebars. That is a great feature. It's relatively enjoyable. I think experiencing that kind of technology for the first time on a motorcycle where I've been able to navigate maps, for instance, is really neat. The user interface is relatively intuitive. It didn't take a whole lot of me playing with it to figure it out. You know, I was able to figure it out pretty quick. But I think my biggest issue with it is that it is outdated immediately, right? The moment that this bike released, that speedometer became out of date because that's how technology works. That's how touchscreens work. That's how anything that involves navigation works, is that long-term, that is going to be a very dated piece. Right? We're gonna look back on that in 10 years and be like, oh, I remember the first navigations on motorcycles. I remember that. They put like a little Raspberry Pi user interface, UI, on this motorcycle so you can navigate maps in the menu. And again, I do enjoy it. It is very convenient. Is it necessary? I don't think so. I think most people would prefer just to use their phones because your phone has constantly getting you updates, you know. I just think that the average person would prefer to use their phone. And that's a cool thing about this too, is that it can integrate with your phone. You connect it to Bluetooth, you can listen to music with it, you can watch navigation, stuff like that. So you can integrate it to a Bluetooth device and make it just that much more intuitive. And I think as convenient as it is now, that will be obsolete in the next 4 to 5 years. And I think a great way to cap this is what would I change about this motorcycle, right? I'm not an engineer, I'm not a designer, but what are the things that I as a rider would change? And I gotta be honest, man, the answer is very, very little. I would not change much about this motorcycle. Maybe slightly different handlebars, and that's a big maybe. Definitely some bags for storage, maybe some leather bags. I don't know if they offer hard plastic cases, but definitely some sweet leather bags would make this thing look good and it'd be a little bit more user-friendly. You'd be able to carry stuff on it. I think that would look good. Obviously an exhaust. That's the first thing that I would change, is the exhaust. Maybe a blinker delete or a relocation. I mean, they fit the style of the motorcycle. You know, I'm kind of a minimalist. I certainly would remove all the reflectors, maybe relocate the tag. I'm not positive on that. I think the side profile looks pretty good. Outside of that, I think this bike stands very strong and very proudly on its own two wheels. I think it's a great motorcycle. I think anybody would be happy owning one, especially if you're migrating from maybe like a Honda Shadow or even like a Harley Sportster. I think if you were to pick something like this up, you'd be like, wow, this thing is hot shit, dude. Very comfortable, very quick, rides great. I mean, at no point was I really longing for more out of this motorcycle. This bike kind of met all of my expectations and exceeded them in some aspects. And all the things that I have to say that are negative about this motorcycle are just kind of like little nitpicky things, you know? It could be cheaper, could be louder, it could have less stuff on it, but I think overall, it's a very solid and well-built motorcycle, and I think just about anybody would be happy to have one of these things. And with that being said, I also want to say thank you very much to the Indian Motorcycle Company for letting me borrow this thing for a month and not getting mad when I abused it a little bit, maybe broke a couple of laws. And still letting me keep it for the remainder of the loan period. They've been very accommodating to work with. Any concerns that I've had about the motorcycle over the last month, they've immediately responded to me and answered my questions, or again, we were working on deals about possibly getting some accessory stuff, maybe in future videos when our time frames work out a little bit better. I personally would really like to test ride the FTR. I think a lot of people on my channel would like that, so make sure you leave a comment so they can see it and be like, yeah, get down the FTR. I am on the list, I'm just waiting for them to get one available. But tell me what you guys think. Leave a comment below what you think about this motorcycle. I tried to answer most of the questions that people left in my last video. If there's anything else that you can think of, I'll try to leave a comment and respond to that as well in this video. And yeah, catch one at your local Indian dealership, or maybe you can find one used. But now I gotta go drop this motorcycle off. The sun has come out, the rain has stopped, and I gotta go sadly return the Indian Scout 101. That being said, thanks for watching, guys. I love you, and we will see you in the next video.